to do when we talk about those cost containment measures is the whole goal of this preliminary budget is to try to reduce what you can so that all available funds can go to classroom education. Our focus is teachers. Our focus is trying to maintain our current level of personnel so that we don't move backwards. And that's why we're aggressive in our cost containment. So it's important, too, as we change subjects here a little bit, to think about what the trends are. I think that the school committee knows this, but the public might be interested in knowing that the demographics of our enrollment is changing, and we're starting to see a gradual shift from elementary to secondary. The enrollment levels at the middle school and high school are increasing each and every year because there is a bubble of children moving through, and the elementary enrollments are approximately level. Some tiny dips here and there, but approximately level, whereas secondary is moving up. So that has impacts on how we redeploy our personnel. And then, of course, the other major trend data, as noted earlier, is the loss of ARRA funds. This is a graphic that shows what the secondary enrollments have looked like from the year 2000. And you can see the light blue line is the high school enrollment. And you can see a fairly precipitous increase, particularly in the middle first half of the first decade of the century. And now, and you can see then it leveled off and continues to grow up, to move upwards. And the other line, the darker line, is representing the middle school enrollment.
And the key thing on this chart is that the base of it is 525 students.
Yes.
That is truncated data, and so those charts are, if you put that down below twice,
Yes.
you'd have the high, you know, it wouldn't be quite so stark.
As dramatic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Even in the years where you saw large increases, the increase would be, 40 or 50 students. Mr. Bowers points out that the way the logarithm here works, it tends to exaggerate the impact. But still, in a small building, 40 students has an impact on teaching staff.
Carl, one question on the high school enrollment, and I don't know how much this impacts the middle school enrollment, but with the new school, we've had discussion that could keep more students in North Reading, especially at the high school level, maybe even at the middle school level, where we have students every year that go off to Austin Prep. Is that included in this calculation?
When we did the design enrollments with the MSBA, that was part of the formula that they used to determine what the maximum enrollment could be for this new building project, so it is included.
Thanks.
So let's start to get a little more specific. There's a graphic that shows our ARRA funds. In FY10, we had over $1 million available to us. If it weren't for those ARRA funds during FY10, the first year of the economic collapse, we would have had significant layoffs. And decreasingly each year, we've been able to use those ARRA funds. You can see FY12, the amount, as I noted before, is around $339,000. Then moving into FY13 is gone. The hope was that ARRA funds would be used as a temporary fix until the state and local source is regenerated. And at this stage, it looks like they won't be regenerating sufficiently to maintain some of the programs we'd like to implement. So as you think about what the FY13 budget structure is, I believe that these themes are themes that have been discussed with the school committee. We are level funding expenses. We're not showing any growth, even though we're, as noted before, we're down that 18% figure. So we feel we're going to recommend a level funding again. There are some minor personnel adjustments that we can go into. We would call these adjustments, not growth. And this is symbolic of the enrollment shifts that have taken place, as well as a special education initiative. But the overall impact of these adjustments is only 0.6 FTE. 2 weeks ago, Superintendent Willis shared with you the vision statement that had been generated by her and the administrative staff. This was a look into the future. This was an attempt to provide direction as to where the district wants to go in the years to come. And there was a price tag affixed to that vision. But once again, based on our economic situation, this preliminary budget does not include any of the initiatives articulated by the superintendent a couple weeks ago. Lastly, this budget does include, at this time, a salary pool, which is an attempt to quantify what the costs of the teacher contract will be. So, I know that's a little fuzzy, plus you have the original, but this is what it looks like. This is a breakdown of what the FY13 preliminary budget looks like. I would draw your attention to that figure right there, and that is showing you what the delta is for FY13 over FY12. It's just short of $1.2 million, even with the level funding that we've discussed. Unfortunately, the cost of maintaining this moderated or modified service, the cost of maintaining this modified level services budget comes in at that number, and that is about a 5% increase. I point out again that when you look at the 5 school budgets, you see the fact that when you look at the change column, it's 0 in 4 cases. So you can kind of see that the vast majority of this $1.2 million increase is comprised in salary. Just a note here, even though it's kind of specific, why is the high school up $50,000? Kind of jumps out at you. There are a couple of reasons. The first reason is this is kind of a bookkeeping issue. It turns out that the services of the athletic trainer used to be a service that was included in our payroll. It was an individual we were paying to provide athletic training services, but that service is now being provided by the same individual who is now incorporated, so it becomes an expense. So you're just shifting money from payroll to expense. That's the explanation. And I should say that same amount was deducted from payroll, so it's a wash. And then the second reason is, at the present time, because of issues we're having with revenues in athletics, we are recommending a $25,000 increase in athletics in order to keep the revolving fund solvent. So in this budget, again, this is first stage, first draft. There may be changes that happen in the future, but we're understanding that because of a softness, a moderate decline in athletes, which leads to less revenue from user fees, as well as, more importantly, more athletes qualifying for free and reduced lunch, which means the user fee is waived. For those two reasons, we are recommending that $25,000 increase, which shows up in that $50,000.
Yeah, Carl, if I can just point out, last year we ended the year with approximately a $20,000 to $25,000 deficit in that fund. We're looking at the same deficit this year. Moving forward, we just think it's good planning to have that come out of the budget as opposed to hoping we're going to all of a sudden see a big uptick in revenues from fees in the revolving account.
Thank you. It's well said. Thank you. So, and then I just point out again, it's kind of interesting when you just look at one particular school, the Batchelder School, you see the movement of their school budget from $99,000 to $84,000. And in the case of the Batchelder School, it's a 15% decrease.
Carl, one more thing I want to point out on that expense budget issue. It's hard to quantify, specific items, but what that does is it actually puts, in my opinion, more pressure on the parents in the community because teachers have to ask for more stuff to come from home. And the wish lists get longer and longer and longer. And this is a very generous community. I know parents have committed a lot of funds and other support, but that's what it does. It puts more pressure on the parents of children who are school age, especially at the elementary school level.
So we're nearing the end here of this presentation. I thought this slide was very instructive, because what it does is it takes that largest component of the budget increase, which is salaries, $1,023,000, as shown at the bottom, and then it breaks it out to show you what contributes to, or what is the composition of that increase. And the green bars represent the relative impact of each of these drivers. And as would be no surprise to anyone, the collectively bargained steps represent the single largest component of the salary increase. An estimate for a salary pool. This next one called a decrease in offsets. What that means is the ARA funds that used to be made available to us were used to offset salaries. We literally paid individuals out of ARA money. So the loss of that ARA money actually makes the salary costs go up, because you're having to use all local funds as opposed to share those funds in other areas. There are some smaller figures there as well, but that kind of just gives us an understanding for the composition of the salary increase. And this year is no different from any other year, unfortunately. The costs of the kinds of teacher contracts that are in most districts tend to be in that 4 or 5% or $1 million category. So lastly, let's look at where we go from here. In the days to come, we will be distributing copies of this budget to the community, to the other town officials for their review and feedback. The school committee will be working with the finance committee at an evening workshop session coming up March 7th, where we make a presentation of this budget to the finance committee. We've tentatively scheduled a budget forum here at the middle school in the large group room on April 9th, where we make the presentation to the public. So important, at the same time, as all of this process unfolds, the finance planning team, of course, which is comprising of the local officials, we'll be working with them to try to see what kinds of revenues are available to the town, so that we can try to work with this budget as best we can. School committee is scheduled to take an official position on the budget May 7th. That's about 1 month prior to town meeting. It is that school committee vote that will appear in the town warrant, and ultimately, well, I should say that will actually, the school committee vote goes to the Board of Selectmen. And then finally on June 4th, the community votes to appropriate a school budget. So that's a quick overview, and be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Cal. Kathy, do you want to add anything before we have
Well,
questions?
I'd just like to thank Mr. Nelson for his meticulous preparation of this information for you, and the work that he's done with me and with the entire administrative council in preparing this budget as we look forward to FY13. And again, I'd just like to re-emphasize, this is a modified level services budget, because we've continued to level fund expenses for the last 5 years. And we're trying to be as proactive as we can to conserve, to be creative, but we recognize that we have some work ahead of us. And I would like to propose that we schedule a budget workshop for the school committee this evening to take a look at the budget in more detail and to answer your questions that you may have. But at this point in time, Carl is able to take any questions you may have this evening.
Okay, I'll open up to the committee for either comments or questions. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do in digesting this. We just saw it for the first time on Friday. And there's a lot in here. Kyle, again, it is great detail, tremendous job. I don't know what we'll do without you. But it is a lot of good work here, obviously, and a lot of very specific. I mean, the detail that Karen was asking about regarding what constitutes the school budgets is right in here, right down to the dollar in every area that they spend it on. You know, obviously that we saw the increase, and as Kathy said, this is level services. This is essentially carrying forward what we're doing. If there's any positions, it's a couple, right? I think maybe two positions total.
1.5 that we needed to add programmatically.
Okay, 1.5 throughout the entire district. So again, I'd open up to the committee for questions or comments.
some questions.
Val?
I'll save my comments for later.
How come he gets to go first?
He raised his hand first.
On